There's a certain feeling, a primal fear which arises in all animals. From an instinctual standpoint, we've been conditioned into two different states, flight or fight. Oftentimes, the younger you are, the more likely you are to pick the first option, cowardice, fear. I think growing up is an integral part of learning to pick your fights. Still, there must have been moments, glimpses from your past when you felt so hopeless all you could do is cry. I remember that feeling well, from when I was a kid, the kind where everything scary just hits you all at once. Like animals sensing danger, we either run or stand our ground, fight or flight. That's the instinct wired into us. And honestly, the younger you are, the more you want to pick running away, because facing it feels just impossible. That's exactly the main theme the 2001 anime Alien 9 covers. From an operational standpoint, what if the entire world was being invaded by aliens constantly? But unlike, let's say, conventional ways of dealing with them, due to the constant influx of said aliens, even 6th graders are forced into the heat of war, sent out to capture the creatures which are treated like endangered animals. As a result, those tasked with confronting them are strictly prohibited from killing or harming them. To make matters worse, each person has to be forcefully fused to a frog-like alien parasite named a Borg, which begins feeding on their bodily wastes. It's quite a grim reality, all things considered, and one that must be extremely hard to those said 6th graders. What makes it stand out to me the most is that despite everything, it isn't a magical girl series, not even adjacent to one. I've seen countless people compare it to online to Madoka Magica, but I feel like this is its own thing. The reason I decided to get around to it is that the script is put together by one of the writers who worked on my favorite works in anime of all time, Murai Sadayuki. You might recognize him as the scriptwriter for both Perfect Blue and Millennium Actress or even Steam Boy, but for me, the most important aspect is that he worked on both Boogie Pop Phantom and Kino's Journey, which are among some of my favorite series. Since Alien 9 is an adaptation, the script does not differ that much from the source material, but the changes he did where he did are really important and help bring the whole piece together as a cohesive story. But particularly, this is one of the cases where the OVA is better than the manga source material because of the newly added content, which helps develop the bonds the characters have and even give some scenes a better emotional impact. I'll address these changes as they come up later, but for now, they aren't essential to understanding the core of the story itself. I think it's also important to state that the original writer of the manga, Hitoshi Tomizawa, is also the author of the Yume Nikki manga, and was the one person handpicked by Kikiyama to write that work. I think that's quite interesting. Anyways, the story is set in 2014, 16 years after humanity's first contact with aliens, and follows Yuri Ootani, a rather melancholic 12-year-old has just arrived in the 6th grade at elementary school number 9. At the beginning of the first episode, we witness the classroom hold an election, almost like a class president election, but this time for the alien party, a team whose primary objective is to capture any otherworldly aliens that may appear on campus. She's elected against her will as the alien fighter of her class and forced to join the ranks of the party, a party spearheaded by one of the teachers named Megumi Hisakawa. When she realizes she's been elected, Yuri's reaction is instant as her eyes become teary, exclaiming out loud that this is going to be the worst year of elementary school. She's also of the opinion that the only reason she got voted in the first place was because everyone banded together against her, because they did not want to do it themselves. Normally a class president or responsible person is usually chosen through a harmless civic exercise, but in this case and with the responsibility, it feels like the class had picked Yuri to become their collective scapegoating ritual. Yuri doesn't read the vote as them recognizing her abilities and putting their trust in her, rather she feels betrayed, and you can feel that in the way she says, "Everyone just wanted me to do it because they didn't want to." She immediately thinks of her role as something dirty, something people want to avoid touching, almost like being a janitor. As such, I don't feel like her crying is necessarily immature. It's very clear that at her age of 12 years, she realized everyone else in class thinks she's the most expendable out of them. Even eventuated by the fact there's only really 2 other votes that weren't for her in the first place, which are probably Yuri's and her friend's Miyu's. Remember what I said earlier, that there's a primal fear in bearing responsibility you don't want to bear. In fear of death, in the wish to fight fights that aren't yours, especially when you are forced to pick to fight and cannot run away. The way she phrases her thoughts, saying this will be the worst last year of elementary school is important not only for her character but also to the overarching plot of the story, since the end of elementary school is one of those liminal points of childhood where childhood is sort of drawing to a close as she's entering teenagehood, and in this case the system she's part of treats her like an adult, although she barely thinks of herself as one. I know that feeling. I've been there too. A lot of us have had to do things in our lives we really don't want to do. And no matter how much we cried and screamed, our parents, our teachers, our mentors, our friends would not let us deny and run away from responsibility. Her classmate Miyu tries to see the half-full part of the glass and tells Yuri that she kind of envies her since she doesn't have to do homework and can skip class whenever there's any alien trouble. Still, Yuri says that Miyu's not in her position, so she doesn't truly know how she feels. Even if Miyu's trying to be nice, her comment comes directly across as a soft form of emotional gaslighting, even if unintentional. It tries to imply that even though Yuri got the short end of the stick, it's some sort of privilege to be in that position, when for her it's clearly not. You can't physically imagine yourself into her role without inhabiting her fear. This just pushes Yuri to feel increasingly more alone, more isolated. No one around her is actually curious about how she feels. They're only projecting their own relief onto her. She gets to meet her other teammates in the alien party the same day, also including its leader, Miss Megumi Hisakawa, and two girls, Kumi, a brown-haired girl, and Kasumi, a blonde girl. Soon after, Megumi gives them their Borgs and explains that the Borgs are made to protect them from danger, but once attached they'll become the hosts and have to enter some symbiosis. Upon seeing the Borgs for the first time, she gets terribly scared and clings on to the tallest of the girls, almost seeking comfort. She cannot accept what she has to do, what she has to endure. The first time she merges with her Borg, it licks her face and she immediately faints. While it's somewhat played for laughs, it's more of a sad reaction, a dissociative response as her body shuts down because of how scared, how vulnerable she feels. An invasion of intimacy, affectionate in a way that completely ignores consent. It's closeness she hates, slimy, morbid closeness she wishes to run away from. But she can't. The instinct of flight or fight won't let her. It will never let her. There's an extra added scene here in the anime where she sits in the living room with her mom, complaining that she doesn't want to ever go to school again. At which point her mom scolds her, saying that they can't change the system just for her, and that the other girls are doing it too. Her mom doesn't necessarily seem worried about this job because it's somehow been normalized at a systemic level. As such, when her mom says that the others are doing it too, this too is the voice of the system speaking through a parent. Yuri isn't told that her feelings aren't true per se, or that it's wrong to feel afraid of this prospect of fighting aliens, but the person she expects comfort from the most, her mother, just doesn't offer her that. Instead, we see her appeal to fairness and inevitability. She can't beg the adults to take care of it, she can't get someone to replace her, it's just an empty state out of which she cannot advance. As she sits there in the living room watching a movie about an alien parasite bursting out of people's chests on TV, she gets terrified and quickly shuts it off. Her breathing is now irregular, her fear is real, it's externalized already because aliens exist. This could very well be happening to her. The fear then is somatic and real in its existence. She cannot escape it. In her room, she sulks in the darkness, her head bent down on the desk, repeating, "I can't do it, I was pushed into it." She isn't saying, "I'm weak" or "I'm scared," this time just pointing out that the choice was never hers to begin with. She's desperate, and that desperation doesn't come from the aliens themselves per se, but they are as important and relevant to the job as ever. It's because every authority figure so far, teachers, classmates, parents, tell her about the same thing in different ways. This is happening whether you want it or not. A voice resounds behind her. There's no sense sulking about it. She gets scared, and upon looking back, she sees the eyes of the Borg talking. In an immediate and creepy moment, the alien looks almost possessed. It's disturbing, and it seems the Borg is almost bargaining, negotiating with her. She's at first pulled back by the fact the Borg can talk, but soon enough, he asks to discuss this over dinner, as in licking the sweat of Yuri to feed itself. She's reluctant, but she has to, because this is a give and take relationship. Yuri is needed in this relationship, but she has no leverage over her free will once again. While Feeding, the Borg asks why she doesn't want to do the job, and she responds that she doesn't like aliens, how they look. She hates them, doesn't want to see them, doesn't want to touch them, and most importantly, doesn't want to be licked by them. The Borg tells her that there's no way to get out of it now. There's a little cut scene from the manga where she begins crying, in which she says, "I really don't like being licked." With no other options, this is the life Yuri is going to be forced to live. One without boundaries or reservations of her own. The next day we get an anime-only scene showing Kasumi, the blonde girl, getting ready for school, with the Borg still attached to her head. She's almost ecstatic at how happy she is, juxtaposing directly Yuri's version of being assigned in this case. She wears perfume and her Borg even comments on it, while she blankly stares at a photograph of her with her brother, and then responds that her brother loved this perfume too. Kasumi's attachment to her brother is an important characteristic of her character, which will be brought back later, but for now what's important for her arc is that she's happy to be an alien fighter. When the girls arrive at school on that day, an alien pod lands, releasing a parasitic spider-like creature which they now have to catch. Kasumi and Kumi charge right in, trying to catch them in their bug nets. Yuri just freezes in place scared. She cannot move, the primal fear has already kicked in. For Yuri, this represents a total failure of complying to the flight or fight instinct. It's a psychological shutdown. Her body refuses to participate even when her mind knows what's expected of her. The others chase the bug, but miss it, and as a result it starts charging towards Yuri, who immediately starts crying and cowering in fear. This showcases an important rule in hunting these creatures, that if you don't engage properly, the danger will find you anyway. There's no way to hide on the sidelines. As a result of the alien's attack, her Borg grows metal spikes out of its wings and kills it in a short and visceral moment. Immediately the bug blows up and spews green blood over Yuri's face, who soon faints from being grossed out and scared. Immediately after, we witness a conversation between Miu and Yuri after their music class, in which Yuri tells her she really wants to quit. We also get a memory of what happened immediately after waking up from fainting. Her teacher calls her, telling her that if she kept saying I'm scared, the Borg will take it upon itself to protect her and in the process kill the aliens they need to capture. She follows that up with, they may be aliens but we must respect their lives. What is the result of all this? Simply put, if she ever feels scared, the Borg will activate to protect her, killing the aliens, creating an effective double bind. If she's scared, she ends up sacrificing lives, otherwise her being scared and having that emotion causes a moral dilemma. The system wants ethical restraints towards the aliens while showing no ethical concern for the child's mental state. She can do nothing. Kumi represents a different, more socially acceptable response to the same system that crushes Yuri. Where Yuri freezes and Kasumi aestheticizes her role, gamifying its existence, Kumi internalizes responsibility itself and feels the need to take it upon herself. As a result, she doesn't resist the system emotionally. Instead, all of her worries are pushed out of her mind as she tries to focus on becoming more efficient within the job she's assigned to. This makes her appear stable, reliable, even mature, exactly because she has already learned to suppress her emotions well. After class, she tries speaking to Kumi, begging her for help, but she refuses, saying, "I don't want to be a nice person anymore." Kumi is burned out of being nice because she feels everyone around her depends on herself too much. She never gets to do that. Kumi is attempting clumsily and perhaps cruelly to reclaim a sense of self that has been eroded by the constant expectations she receives from others. But in doing so, comes across like a horrible person. Yeah, she's cold and a bit antagonistic, but in her mind all of that is justified. Another thing that the anime added for her character is the following scene, in which she explains that she used to be her class's president starting from first grade and hated the job because she had to meddle in other people's affairs and everyone relied on her. She snaps at Yuri, telling her not to lean on her now. Just like Yuri, she was placed into a role she did not choose, but unlike Yuri, she complied and did so for 6 whole years of her life. The resentment she feels and expresses is the emotional cost of that compliance, something that's been built up over years of being fed up and forced to resolve other people's problems. Being relied upon from such a young age taught Kumi that closeness and responsibility are one and the same, and that helping others inevitably leads to no self-agency or growth of her own. Later, when Kumi is writing the daily report and sitting with Kasumi, Kasumi tells her she should have helped Yuri because that's what she's good at. people rely on her. This furthermore enhances Kumi's hatred for that role of the mediator, because she's not seen as a person who chooses to help, but as someone whose value lies in being relied upon. Fact eventuated by Kumi's daily life. As she heads home on her own, through mellow sunsets and the purple city, as the anime juxtaposes beautiful backgrounds of the late dusk. At home, her mother even relies on Kumi, asking her to wake her up in 3 hours. As she's leaning on the window and thinking about what Kasumi said, she realizes maybe she's a bit jealous of Yuri or Kasumi. Evidently in this case she refers to Yuri, because while Yuri feels helpless, she can easily rely on others because of her weakness. Kumi had been too responsibilized by this point and can no longer go back to being a child as such. The three girls are somewhat different from one another, in surprisingly different ways. Yuri is scared and reluctant, Kasumi is childish but the best out of all three at her job, and Kumi is responsible and mature, fact which is also shown through their own family lives. These differences are not innate personality traits so much as adaptive responses to pressure or ways to handle themselves in life. Each girl has developed a way to survive expectation. Yuri resists internally and tries to run from responsibility. Kasumi performs enthusiasm and Kumi assumes responsibility. Their family lives do not merely reflect these traits, they are actually the originating factor of them, reinforcing specific emotional roles long before the alien party enters the picture, which is shown in the scene where their teacher visits their home, a scene placed right after the old one with Kumi. For Yuri, her mom immediately snitches on her, saying she's been complaining about some terrible party and calling her useless around the home. Yuri's home as such is no safe place at all. Her fears and insecurities are thrown by her mom straight to the teacher, publicly exposed and dismissed. Her emotional vulnerability is seen by the adults as something to be corrected, further isolating Yuri from her wish to run. For Kumi, we learn that her father died when she was 4, and since then she's lived with her mom and turned quite independent. Kumi herself even admits that she cooks her own food, takes care of herself, along with helping her mom with research, processing, bookkeeping for her job as a writer. With the loss of her father, responsibility filled the emotional vacuum left behind, and there was also a need for it since her mother was too busy working to take care of her. Independence became her defining trait because there was no alternative, and this explains her attitude towards most things in her daily life, as well as she seems to be compensating for the absence of her father. The alien party simply extends that burden into another domain. For Kasumi, she comes from a rich family. Her father states he does not want to force his children to do anything or put any restrictions on them, but won't let them abandon, to give up the effort halfway. Kasumi's upbringing is structured around performance. She is free to choose so long as she excels or does not drop what she is doing. This explains her attitude toward the alien party. Having chosen or not chosen it, it is now irrelevant. She has to approach her role with enthusiasm rather than fear, and this is why she measures herself through visible achievement. Here is where we also learn her brother is absent because he is studying overseas. When the teacher comes to Kasumi's room, Kasumi shows her all of the plethora of awards she has received. The awards serve as proof of Kasumi's value, not just to others but to herself. Because unlike Yuri, whose emotions are treated as liabilities, or Kumi, whose labor is taken for granted, Kasumi's worth is continuously affirmed through recognition from her peers, and this explains why she adapts so smoothly to the alien party. But there's one person she wishes to be praised by more than anyone else, and that would be her brother. Here the anime and manga start to differ a bit, as this next event happens earlier in the manga. But some ball-like alien invade the school, and once again Yuri isn't able to do anything to stop them. This time she gets scared but makes the Borg shield her instead and begins crying. The animal gets tranquilized by Kumi, and afterwards Yuri runs to hug her and begins crying while screaming her name. Kumi's intervention just shows the division of roles within the group cannot be broken. She acts efficiently and decisively, occupying the position Yuri cannot. In the manga, there's an additional scene where we see Kumi teach her to shoot her tranquilizer gun properly, but here it's missing, I'm assuming to cut on the pacing. Kasumi finds Yuri taking a break soon after and asks her if she's slacking off. Yuri asks her why Kasumi joined the alien party, and her response is simply that she enjoys it. Because Yuri's question is less curiosity than desperation. She's searching for a reason that might make her own suffering intelligible. If Kasumi had a motive, be it duty, necessity, rewards, then perhaps the role can be endured, but as usual, nothing goes Yuri's way. Enjoyment is not something Yuri can argue with or emulate, and as such, in this moment it feels like the difference between them is immense. When the time comes for the yearly examination, Yuri remarks that if she was Kasumi, she would never join the alien party because she's from a good family and is so talented. At which point Miu adds that her grades are so good she could get into any junior high without having to be in the alien party. When Yuri is measured, she's happy she grew 5 centimeters, at which point one of the girls from the crowd says that when her sister was in junior high, the girls in the alien party also seemed to grow in height for no reason. At which point all the other girls except Miu laugh. At which point Miu stands up for Yuri, saying it's not nice because they don't know how she feels. The idea that the alien party girls grow unnaturally is quite scary and of course might frighten one. What is the extent at which this alien might change her own body? Sitting in bed, Yuri wonders what might happen if she kept the Borg always on and drifts to sleep. Both these scenes are anime only. In the dream, she's inside a flower field with a singular tree. The flowers are daisies, dandelions, spider lilies, red clover, and there's white petals falling from the sky. As per usual for this channel, I love the Jungian interpretation of dreams, so I'll go forward analyzing this dream from a Jungian lens. In Jungian terms, the flower field is a symbolic temenos, a sacred enclosed psychic space where the unconscious prepares for transformation. However, the diversity of flowers undermines the image of harmony. Daisies and dandelions are representations of innocence and childhood simplicity, while spider lilies are culturally associated with death, separation, and the afterlife. The unconscious here combines a layer of purity with one of morality, showing that Yuri's cognition and psyche cannot imagine innocence without it being intruded. In the dream, she wears a white gown, a dress. Miu wears the same dress and tells her, "I envy you," wearing it all the time. The white dress symbolizes a persona forced upon Yuri: purity, responsibility, moral visibility. Miu's envy does not reflect Miu's true feelings, but Yuri's internalized belief that her suffering is being misread as privilege. Jung would see this as a projection of Yuri's psyche that externalizes her fear, that others see her role as enviable, reinforcing her sentiment of isolation. The Borg appears in her dream possessed with its organs exposed on a stick, its heart beating. This Borg is a direct manifestation of the shadow, the Jungian concept. Everything Yuri represses, the disgust, resentment and fear, are now given the grotesque form she hates. The Borg is no longer attached to her but displayed, impaled, yet still alive. This image forms out of her wish because she wants separation from the Borg, even its destruction, but cannot seem to escape the guilt over the Borg's living heart. The symbiosis is psychologically intolerable, yet morally inescapable because it would mean taking a life, which would cause in Yuri's worldview a fallacy. Miu shifts into her teacher and says the Borg's life is as important as her, at which Yumi answers in her dream that Yuri hates Borgs. The transformation represents an assimilation of the external authority. Each person is the same within the dream. As such, this is the voice of the superego, the moral law overriding Yuri's lived suffering. Kumi's interjection works as the ego's accusation towards the self. It articulates a truth Yuri herself cannot say out loud. Jung would see this as a psychic fragmentation, the idea that different complexes and specifically selves speak about Yuri rather than as her, although they still are the same person. She teleports in front of a bus station, although the world still appears to be in the flower field. In Jungian symbolism, the bus represents a shared direction in life, a predetermined route meant to be taken with others. This dream sets the bus station within the field of flowers, and this helps contrast and explain Yuri's indecision and division. The station itself represents her need to move forward, while the field represents the desire to remain without responsibility, childish and secure. She is forcefully pulled towards adulthood, while she still feels like a child, unable to comprehend what is happening to her within the surreal landscape of the dream. The voice of a Borg can be heard as the bus is leaving, asking her if she wants to become a junior high school student as well, and then the Borg bursts out of her stomach laughing. The act is close if not exactly the same as the classic Jungian image of the psychic content forcing itself into consciousness with the help of trauma. Its laughter is creepy and feels like it helps deepen the violation, since it doesn't only accompany the eruption but mocks her own agency. It basically makes fun of her bodily development, humiliating it. Growing older therefore doesn't appear as a natural process of maturation, but as further consumption, as if her development belongs to something else rather than to her. She looks down in fear, and then Kasumi appears from the flowers, catching her in a net. Kasumi is the trickster figure of this dream. She appears both to disrupt the flow of the dream and to test Yuri. She captures her like they do to the aliens in everyday life, essentially showing her that she's trapped herself, at least symbolically. Yuri is saved, but only by being treated like the very creature she's forced to hunt, and as such, this save isn't truly real. Yuri asks her how come she joined the party, and Kasumi screams "Nya" as loud, making Yuri wake up in a sweat, scared. The psyche feels like it aborts the dream to protect itself, and because of the fear she breaks the symbolic process before her integration can even begin. As such, this will cause the dream to become a reoccurring one. If you couldn't tell by now, this is a dream about Yuri's fear of growing up, of becoming an adult and being changed by the Borg itself. It also sets up a creepy undertone mystery that might imply all adults that have appeared in the series might have been changed by the aliens. The next day they are hunting aliens again. Yuri is telling Kumi the story of her dream, and they soon both come to the realization that Kasumi has something none of them do. And as they say that, she jumps off the building. Kasumi acts without hesitation because she does not overthink the danger. Both the girls get scared, but she manages to catch both the alien and herself, at which Kumi adds, "Us, we could have never done this. We each have our strengths and weaknesses." As they all look at the sunset in the distance, this is Kumi's first true moment of self-recognition, rather than self-denial. Earlier she rejected being relied upon, but here she articulates difference without resentment, and it feels like a win. You begin as a viewer to root for these characters that didn't seem to get along at first, finally band together as a team and watch this beautiful sunset. It's because this is the first time Yuri wasn't possessed by anxiety since the start, and the first time Kumi overdevelops her superego. They are different, but no one is ashamed anymore. Throughout the episode we see glimpses of the teacher documenting that each of the girls are special, but only Yuri is average, and that she will need to make a tremendous effort to get past all of her problems. This compounds into what object relations theory would call internalized inadequacy, because Yuri isn't just scared but also afraid of underperforming. The system created by the alien party requires extraordinary emotional control and even labels her as ordinary, but still keeps her in because of an unknown reason. As the teacher heads towards the mirror, we however see her hair turn into the metal spikes of the Borgs, meaning she might be alien. She's perhaps one of the people whose identity of symbiosis has entered a superposition, where they both assimilate each other. As the episode ends, Miu and Yuri go together home, after Yuri feeds the Borgs with the alien party, and so the first episode concludes. I want to take a moment to talk a bit about the outro of the show. Actually, both the intro and the outro, because each episode is punctuated by this really beautiful ED called Rebirth, showcasing scenes of real-life cityscapes with the main characters scattered among these velvet sunsets. These sorts of landscapes help ground the story in mundane reality, which is the truth of Alien 9's invasions. Everyone's used to them. The sunset motif repeating here links to the previous scene liminality, in between states of thought beyond the self. It's a beautiful mellow song with lyrics that talk about feeling sad or happy, an in-between state reflected by all the mirrors around you, and questioning whether what you feel is real or not. The song is broken apart by voice lines from the character saying repeatedly, "I don't know," until it crescendos. It's really important the way it's phrased, because it's a story about each character searching for themselves, and the repetition of the phrase is developmentally accurate for early adolescents, and specifically for this type of coming-of-age story. Afterwards, the final line being, "I saw your real feelings and finally felt." This line is the needle that broke the camel's back, because if it wasn't apparent, this makes it clear. The ED clearly tells you the show is not about the horror, but about a story of emotional recognition and mental instability. If I had one thing to say, is that The show knows how to mellow the viewer into this innate and ineffable feeling by pairing beautiful scenery with emotional instability. Like the flower fields with the imagery of death, like the sunsets with the moral exhaustion and resolution of an arc, or the soft music with an identity crisis. The aesthetic softness hides the systemic cruelty the world holds at its core, and it is the show's greatest strength among with the realistic depictions of panic, fear, and the flight or fight which children experience at young ages or when growing up. These certain strengths are also shown in the intro of the series, which, unlike the outro, is a more upbeat song, even though its lyrics still tackle quite literally the themes of isolation and change. If we isolate only the necessary lines from the intro, what emerges is not a generic coming-of-age song or an upbeat magical girl theme, but a subtle psychological map of Alien 9 itself. The first line, "An unusual morning comes, my knife-pierced heart is aching," immediately explains what should be a new beginning as intrusion. Morning typically symbolizes freshness or possibility, as an antithesis, as it arrives already carrying pain. Something has pierced the heart before the day has even begun. The series is not about innocence unfolding naturally into maturity and growing up, it is about a wound that precedes growth like a tumor, and many of its aspects are like that. When the lyrics move to "I want to sleep in," the reality is "I'm starting to wake up." The conflict becomes explicit. Sleep for Yuri is safety, regression, refusal. Waking up represents involuntary development. The phrasing is important because she is not choosing to wake up, she is starting to. It is happening to her. This shows Yuri's situation almost perfectly. She does not volunteer for the alien party out of ambition or curiosity, she is pulled into it. A lot of the other lyrics feature wishes, "I want to be protected but." The irony is that she's protected by the Borg, but that protection erodes her sense of self and brings her closer to the thing she hates the most, that being aliens. The song also has a tendency to assert things like, "For sure being an adult is like that," which comes across as naive, like a child imagining adulthood as clarity and confidence. "I don't have the room, today again my head is stuck in yesterday's test," grounds everything in a very ordinary anxiety of the mundane, which Yuri has because she is an elementary school student. There are a few more lines, as I said, that point to the show's themes, like "this body starting to change" or "running faster than anyone, it's about youth." Everything is quite literal, so the line "absolute perfection is boring, in some ways being broken is good" expresses the show's intention. It's about fundamentally flawed characters going through everyday life, through the actions of growing up and needing to become independent. It's not a show about nihilism or even nihilistic by any degree, even though it has an onset of hatred towards this routine and responsibility. If anything, Alien 9 is a show about wanting with all your heart to reject responsibility, about escapism and a need to hide from it, and I think that also grants its music a surreal and peaceful characteristic to the art. This feeling permeates constantly, even as the second episode starts. We see a scene of the teacher speaking on the phone to someone, saying she has 3 girls in the program and she wants to speed up things. After which, a scene showing the alien containment facility shows 3 different headcrab looking aliens. If you couldn't figure out by this point, the school is doing experiments regarding the Borgs themselves. To be more exact, they seem to want to form connections between the girls and the Borgs in order to fuse them together, all spearheaded by their teacher under the premise of protecting the school from alien invasions. If the school is accelerating fusion, then the superego is demanding that the ego permanently merge with aggression. Therein lies the internal conflict of Yuri's life. Another ship lands that day, and while Yuri is sad, Kasumi is happy she gets to do something, saying that otherwise she'd get bored. They begin searching for the aliens, but soon realize the ship the aliens landed with seems to be empty. When discussing with the teacher, she says to keep searching for them, clearly knowing something. We see scenes of a boy put an alien on his head and say his name, blood type and a variety of other details. The parasite-like creatures, similar to the Borgs, soon attaches to him. While Yuri is sitting, the boy with a parasite on his head approaches her and tries to kill her immediately. With the alien spike, but gets soon neutralized as Kasumi jumps in and tranquilizes the parasite with ease. During the next day at school, Miu points out Yuri seems more and more depressed, at which Yuri answers that someone seems to be sending aliens to specifically target her, which is indeed true in this case, because we subsequently learn that Miss Hisakawa is the one releasing the aliens for the alien fighters to train with, as the alien party is really intended to raise suitable human hosts for symbiotic fusion with the Borg of the Drill clan, Miss Hisakawa herself being one result of the process. In an attempt to push Yuri harder in order to speed up her progress, Mrs. Sakawa gives 3 boys in the school the aggressive Gladius parasitic alien in order to serve as training targets because of the apparently relatively weak nature of the alien. Up to this point, Yuri's anxiety could be interpreted as paranoia, but now they're proven to be right, even if the others don't see it. I also think that the reveal that Hisakawa is herself a part of the system is quite interesting, because we don't know if her change was originally forced or not. It makes her psychologically interesting. If she successfully merged ego and aggression, then her calm demeanor might not be maturity, as the anime and manga try to juxtapose the fusion. We see the first boy during the first day, and then the second day a fight occurs between the 2 boys at once, which Kasumi promptly takes care of. Of course, just like in the previous day, the boys seem to aggressively target Yuri. When they're putting them in containment together, Yuri says what she's thinking out loud, and this results in Kumi snapping at her, saying that she's not only absurd, but that she's pissed that she always hides behind others' backs. Trying to bring her to reality, she says, what if there were lots of aliens everywhere? Her speech is extremely aggressive and makes Yuri immediately start crying, at which she screams, "Stop crying." It's really strange coming from her, because not even a week ago in story terms, Kumi resisted being leaned on, and now she rejects weakness outright, after it had already felt like the group had gotten better at working together. I'm not saying her anger isn't valid or what a 12-year-old would do in this scenario, but it comes across as desperate. She's been meddling with other people's troubles, and now feels desperate to force Yuri into functional adulthood. The same day, Yuri falls asleep and has the same dream with the flower field, again, but this time it occurs differently. She's still in the white dress and the location is still the same. In Jungian terms, recurring dream landscapes often represent a psychic complex that has not yet been integrated. In this case, Yuri's responsibilities and her need to run from both adulthood and her job of catching aliens. The field is no longer simply a liminal childhood space, it's the thing that sparked the inner turmoil. The psyche will continue returning to the same symbolic terrain because nothing has been resolved. Mrs. Sakawa shows up and tells her she needs to catch her Borg because it escaped, and gives her a net, the same one they used to catch aliens. She's the representation of the negative animus, and not in the romantic sense. It's an internalized voice of authority that pushes toward rigid development. The net she gives Yuri, also being the same net she catches aliens with, symbolizes an entrapment of the self, as she is metaphorically told to catch herself. After that, Hisakawa grabs a giant daisy and flies away with it. The daisy, symbolically associated with innocence, is turned into a vehicle of escape. Authority ascends with innocence in hand, leaving Yuri grounded and burdened. In Jungian interpretation, this is the displacement of purity onto authority. The institution claims moral legitimacy, while the child is left to wrestle with fragmentation. Yuri says she will try her best, and before her, 3 frog-like Borgs appear. She runs towards them to catch them, but they mock her. "You can't do it, right?" These are clearly shadows, which have become vocal. The shadow contains everything the ego rejects or feels inadequate about. As such, they are articulating Yuri's real-life fears, and the closer she gets to them, the stronger she feels that. As she runs towards them, Kumi erupts out of the flowers, dressed in her alien hunting outfit, and with a Borg on her head, holding 2 giant daisies in each hand. In the first dream, authority figure spoke over Yuri. In this one, her peer appears as a fully molded, formed archetype, the competent warrior. Kumi now embodies the ego ideal Yuri cannot reach. She holds 2 giant daisies, symbols of innocence transformed into tools or trophies. This suggests that Kumi has successfully integrated responsibility without losing composure, at least in Yuri's projection. Kumi is no longer conflicted, she is airborne. When the camera angle changes, Yuri is wearing her alien hunting outfit too. The white dress representing childhood gets superimposed by the uniform representing the role, the slavery of the idea of it. She begs Kumi for help, but Kumi flies away, saying she's on her own. Yuri starts crying. The cruelty of the lies in the fact that Yuri is still developmentally a child, one with a fragile psyche and a sensitive heart. For a second it appears as though she merely fell asleep in the park on the swings. This is a return to an archetype of childhood innocence. The swing moving back and forth between 2 points, it acts just like Yuri's psyche alternating between childhood and adulthood. As she turns around, a scratching can be heard from one of the empty swings, and when she sighs relieved, one of the kids possessed by the aliens appears. In that moment, reality breaks as she wakes in her bed in the morning, finally having awakened from the dream. The dissolution symbolizes weakened ego boundaries. The unconscious has become so charged that it leaked into perception and even fools the conscious. Yuri wakes up crying and once again cries out loud that she wants to quit. Later, sitting in the kitchen and sulking, her mother asks her why she hasn't called any of her friends over, since it's both a Sunday and her 13th birthday, at which Yuri starts crying, saying she forgot entirely. Fortunately, her friends show up unannounced. Miu, Kumi, Kasumi all come to visit her. Kumi is initially really embarrassed and considers going home, but Kasumi stops her, mostly because she feels embarrassed about the way she has treated Yuri so far. When Yuri sees all her friends, including Kasumi, she starts crying out of happiness. It's the first time she feels happy since the start of the show. For the first time since the series began, she feels chosen rather than evaluated or forced into a role. Unlike how she was forced into the alien party, being chosen by friends feels warming and beautiful. The scene here gets intercut with the teacher having dinner with one of her colleagues, discussing how they could advance the process of merging the girls with the aliens faster. At night, she says she will order the same type of alien again and even mentions she'll get tough with them. This all culminates in the teacher making Yuri clean the alien storeroom on her own, since she's the oldest. This is actually an ingenious plan to corner her and attack her, with all three boys at once. When the boys appear before her, they manage to stab her Borg to near death, at which point she begins crying and repeatedly saying, "I'm scared." The other girls who hadn't gone home yet suddenly sense this telepathically. Their Borg stands up and they feel a sense of overwhelming fear as everyone, even if separated, begins crying. This collective reaction shows that the fusion process has already linked them more deeply than they realize. The trauma Yuri has is now being spread across bonded systems as her ego overwhelms everyone else's. They all feel her pain now. Her Borg overloads, almost as it becomes part of her hair, similar to the teachers who are part of the Drill clan. This makes her panic. Her Borg begins killing every alien in the storeroom, including the Gladius aliens. As she walks out of the storeroom to meet her close friend Miu, traumatized and still wearing her Borg, the teacher looks in shock at the bloodbath and remains unmoving in the door. The Borg is immediately doing what Yuri's subconscious is thinking. She hates aliens and as such, the Borg is killing all of them. She encounters Kumi and Kasumi in the gym. Kasumi is now crying in Kumi's arms, and both their Borgs are making a terrifying sound. Yuri simply kills both their Borgs while crying herself. Now even Kumi is crying. Everyone's crying. She finally cut them off from the emotion they were receiving. The very mechanism that formed her trauma are getting dismantled right before everyone's eyes. She walks towards Miu, where her Borg finally deattaches itself, having died long ago. Its continued attachment was simply fueled by inertia, and its death suggests that forced symbiosis was never sustainable in its current form, because of the character of Yuri. As Yuri cries in Miu's arms for a long time, in an ultimate moment of vulnerability, this arc ends as well. Yuri's greatest strength was never combative competence. She wasn't strong, but what lies within her is a great power. If she had successfully hardened, none of this rupture would have occurred, so it hurts, endlessly so. This episode merely has one more scene showing the teacher in her home admitting the test was a failure, but she is mostly unfazed by the trauma she's inflicting on these girls. After all, they sort of volunteered. The third episode focuses on the summer vacation. It's mostly focused on the fact the girls no longer have Borgs, so the teacher begins growing them out of eggs. The main plot follows the girls, including Miu, going on vacation at Kasumi's summer home, where she used to go with her brother every year. There are quite a few symbolic lines, like the fact them watching the sunset on the first day mirrors the sunset they saw on the day hunting aliens. But this time they say something along the lines of, "From tomorrow on we're going to do nothing but play." We also get more insight into Kasumi's relationship with her brother, as she severely wishes he was here, but alas, he's simply too busy. The days pass as the girls engage in a variety of activities, being happy and fulfilled. One night they decide to play a little game where they pick up an orange at a shrine. As usual, some of the people working around the island pretend to be ghosts to scare them, but even Yuri manages to get the orange. However, on the way back, Yuri gets scared by a creature in the trees, and despite the Borgs being dead, both Kumi and Kasumi get a premonition and run towards her. It seems their bond has achieved a level of unconsciousness never before seen. Of course, the creature is nothing to actually be scared of, being merely a flying squirrel. That night, Yuri has another strange dream, one where she's walking through a roofed forest, light piercing the leaves as she spots Miu, which screams at her that she'll be late for school while waving. Yuri is confused since it's summer vacation, but the self in the dream acknowledges it's over. The forest is an unconscious space, but this one is roofed, and that changes the archetype a bit. It's structured in its wilderness. Since the space is different at the beginning from the flower field, this suggests Yuri's unconscious is no longer purely instinctual. The piercing light evokes awareness, trying to break through the repression she feels in her life. The confusion about summer vacation being over shows a psychic acceleration. Childhood seen as vacation is declared finished before she is ready. The dream ego accepts it despite conscious knowledge, a sign that part of her psyche has internalized the demand to grow up prematurely. This sets up the next scene in which the school appears. She goes to school and there she hears the voices of Mrs. Sakawa call her. The teacher looks strange, with the ends of her hair being the Borg's metal spikes. The teacher, just like in real life, is fully merged with her Borg, an internalized superego that has been fused with the moral authority structure in Yuri's psyche. As she walks into the classroom she was called to, she hears a song, "Everyone is an alien, everyone will become an alien." Inside the classroom, a plethora of ghosts of Borgs are floating around and singing with eyes possessed. The song keeps going on, saying that everyone will graduate to become an adult and their bodies will change, as it repeats saying that everyone will become an alien. The collective unconscious is first shown here as something coercive, showing an inevitability that of losing the whole. It's just like the cultural messaging around puberty. Your body will change, this is natural, everyone goes through it. But the dream makes it horrifying as an inevitability of being forced outside into a world changed, no longer yourself. Yuri gets scared and runs away. As she's running away, the field of flowers that's been appearing in every dream is seen outside the window. The flower field has appeared in every dream, and it's very purposeful, as I said before, in presenting themes of innocence and growth. In the dream, she runs past these sceneries and jumps straight into the pool, where she starts having an inner monologue, scared that everyone is an alien. She asks herself, "What can I do?" At which point her friends descend from the sky, saying it's okay, and start singing the creepy song about turning into an alien. Both of them are wearing their alien hunting outfits and their Borgs on their heads. In Jungian terms, the anima/ally figure are no longer mediators between ego and unconscious. They have been absorbed into the same archetypal tide. They are fake rescuers that won't help her in times of need and might actually betray her. A referee whistle is heard where the scene shifts. Now she's in an Olympic pool in the middle of the flower field, where Mrs. Sakawa sits on the lifeguard chair, and she says the race is about to start. As she fires a gun into the air, and Borg start racing towards her, crashing into her. The camera shifts off screen, where we see her school bag fall outside the pool and spill its contents. Time advances to dusk and she's naked in the middle of the pool, alone, only with the sounds of the crickets playing. As if stripped of her persona and self by the Borgs, she can do nothing but cry. And so, she wakes up crying. There's a certain transhumanist aspect to Alien 9 that is so tangible you can feel both a pull towards it and one away from it. A struggle of whether or not to advance the human condition, go with the flow and become assimilated into symbiosis or run away from it. The rest of the summer holiday is spent enjoying time with friends. We also get a nice scene between Kumi and Yuri, where rain starts and they get trapped in a bus station, because they have no umbrellas. Kumi tells Yuri how much everyone is worried about her and that they'll always be together. Eventually summer ends and when coming back to school, the girls get their newly grown Borgs. We see them hunting a bunch of aliens and working with each other almost perfectly. They manage to capture a bunch of aliens as one giant one falls down onto the school. A huge lizard-looking alien the size of the school now sits on top of it. It does not do anything at first. When researching about it, the teacher finds out it's a botanical alien that samples any creature that approaches, studies its weaknesses, isolates those memories that would serve as the enemy's fear from within the sample, and emits them as brainwaves. The alien's name is Yellow Knife. This is one of the only aliens that wasn't actually ordered by the teacher, and instead just attached itself to the shipment vessel and fell on the school when that landed. In the manga, during the first time it arrives, Kasumi gets close to it and notes that it's soft and cuddly and that it smells like her and her brother. I'm saying that because while in the anime we see her staring at it intently, we don't really understand why that night she heads to see it again and gets eaten by it. It's also noted in the manga by the other characters that she's acting weird since first meeting it. Yellowknife doesn't initially show itself as monstrous to Kasumi, he feels familiar. It smells like home and incites her to become one with it. It almost proves a point that Kasumi, while childish in actions and demeanor, is indeed sort of like Yuri. She regresses to childhood self and gives up all logic. It appears that the Yellowknife's effect had already started in some way, because upon swallowing her, it tells her she's the strongest and understands him the most and asks her to protect him. It acts like a wounded puppy. He wants her to feel in control and responsible of its life. It recruits her protective instinct and then manipulates it. These sorts of aspects were in a way predestined by her actions up until this point of the story. Her attachment to her brother, her childlike way of thinking, are all aspects shown in the character's theme as well. Each of the characters of the story has a theme that plays, representing their personality and painting a picture of their true selves. Kasumi is the happiest, being structured like a little happy song a kid might sing. Kumi is in contrast, uses sounds of bells ringing, and while still having a somewhat happy atmosphere, it centers on the structured elements of the song, getting interrupted by school bells and sounds of traffic, showing her somewhat busy and responsible demeanor. While Yuri's is simply angelic, still childish but in a scared, heavenly way, which makes her character stand apart from both Kumi and Kasumi drastically. Details like this is why I love this anime and feel like its character constructions are by far one of the most important aspects. Character constructions that get flipped in the last episode, as we'll see. The fourth and final episode begins with everyone at home getting ready for school, while the teachers are worried about Kasumi, who had been missing since the previous night. The scene with Yellowknife plays out where he asks Kasumi to protect it, and immediately after the beast grows metallic spikes at its back. Almost everyone is immediately possessed by a powerful headache and sent home. All of the students and teachers except the people wearing porgs or those that are already fused to them. The teacher devises a plan to get Kasumi out of there. Meanwhile, inside the beast, the Yellowknife speaks to a tranquilized Kasumi in her brother's voice, saying that since he's gone away, she's been so alone, effectively coercing her into whatever it's going to do. They draw a circle on the belly of the creature, but when Kumi goes in to try and penetrate it with the Borg's prongs, Kasumi's face comes out of the monster and asks Kumi why she's doing that. It's extremely creepy and perhaps even done of Kasumi's own volition, but it's ego identification. Kasumi wants to be one with Yellowknife. A scream from the beast makes everyone puke and immediately faint as their minds overload with unbearable psychic content. Soon after, we get a scene of the headmaster of the school acknowledging that the teacher messed up. After an unmentioned amount of time, the people start waking up and each one of them experiences a sense of unease and loneliness never before felt. Time seems stuck at dusk and everything seems to have disappeared. As they contemplate their next actions, all separated in this mind's palace where they see everyone else missing, the Yellowknife begins sending waves of loneliness, telling them, "You're all alone." Kumi starts crying, traumatized by the utter endless void swallowing her emotion. She screams for help while trembling.
防具。何？
At this point, her Borg forms out of thin air and grabs her, telling her she's not alone, and holding her. The Borg says, just like she told Yuri during summer vacation, "You're not alone, we'll always be together." He says he will protect Kumi until one of them eventually dies. He manages to snap Kumi out of the trance because it logically asserts that there's no way everyone could have disappeared off the face of the earth. The antidote to pathological loneliness is cognitive anchoring, and the Borg acting that way in this case temporarily reverses its role. Although Kumi has never rejected it, she's the most mature of the bunch, and as such, the most in tandem with her Borg. When we shift to Yuri's perspective, we see her merely crying on the stairs and having a hallucination of the flower field. Her Borg leaves her all alone and she wakes having fallen down the stairs. She also realizes her Borg is gone. Well, not truly as with Kumi. Yellowknife only pathologically makes a person believe they are truly alone. She hears for 1 second Kasumi's voice from one of the classrooms, and while this is happening, we get a sort of ethereal flashback of Kasumi's life. A white void forms out of her wish. Kasumi stands beneath banners of achievement, trophies, certificates, applause. Voices overlap, praising her discipline, her talent, her reliability. She smiles and calmly lists the things she loves, her friends, her school, her family. Her words are steady, almost rehearsed. She's so joyous and innocent. From a field of dark silhouettes that are surrounding her, one figure steps forward. He apologizes. He says he's going to study abroad. It is her brother. His body drifts backward into a white void, feet never touching the ground. The void spans endlessly, and Kasumi has to give chase. Kasumi runs after him. The floor dissolves into an endless ocean at dusk. The horizon stretches infinitely, swallowing him inch by inch. Her breathing falters. Her tears fill her face and gather on her cheek. Around her towering wall of trophies and adult voices that rise like showing fears, barricades, expectations, pride and admiration all at once, crowding out the fading figure she was chasing. The praise grows louder as he grows smaller. Now he's gone. In the silence that follows, she whispers, "I love everyone, so why?" The question remains up in the air, far away as she sees herself again on the ocean, now in a white dress. Again, just like Yuri's dream, here it's almost sacrificial, dressed in the color of innocence. Yuri is in real life sitting by the door, witnessing Kasumi in a daze, on the ground, in a classroom. She gets scared by a creature behind her, a figure that looks like Kasumi's brother, boasting Yellowknife's head. The hybrid form is precise in its form, as it reaches a symbolical level of some sorts. The brother represents the idealized attachment object. Yellowknife represents the loneliness complex that feeds on it. Fused together, they form an image of corrupted nostalgia that is Kasumi's weakness. This weakness manifested approaches Kasumi's sleeping body and begins to undress her, disarming her ego and making it vulnerable, metaphorically speaking. All her achievements, pride and identity are being removed to make way for the entry point. What is left is the vulnerable child self that first bonded to her brother. The creature then begins forming a hole in her stomach area, where it burrows its head. Kasumi smiles, saying, "You're home, brother," as Yuri sits terrified by the door. The stomach area is archetypically tied to instinct, hunger, and early dependency, so it's not randomly picked. Instead, it's all about the three facets of childhood. Yuri is dependent on others and unable to do anything on her own. Kasumi is self-sufficient but childish, and Kumi is mature but average. All of them have some sort of dependency on their environments, and in Kasumi's case, her own complex implants itself at the sight of need. Yuri starts sobbing, repeating the phrase, "It's an alien," as the audience no longer sees what's happening to Kasumi. We get a hallucination of a microscopic Kasumi running through the flower field as she finds one of the wave-propagating spikes like those on Yellowknife's back. She says, "Brother." In Yuri's viewpoint, she gets terrified at Kasumi's belly that moves strangely and forms another her that tells her to get lost, but is awakened out of this waking nightmare by her Borg. The Borg here acts as a grounding ego function, stabilizing her back to real consciousness. While the entire point of the scene is that Kasumi's character seeks reunion no matter what, her character isn't mature, but is good at what she does. She's the prodigy, but she's also tricked here into using her psyche as a weapon. I think her love for her brother is not merely brotherly. There's an incestuous characteristic to her attachment, yet still, this is what causes her to react so violently around the idea of people pulling her away from her quote-unquote brother. There's also a sexual characteristic through the intrusion, showing that pathology has been corrupted, breaking her innocence. This scene is immediately followed by a scene of the teacher on the rooftop discussing with Yellowknife, who has shown itself as Kasumi through a hallucination. The teacher tells the creature that its attacks don't work on her because she's not alone, insinuating the fact she's merged with her Borg forever. When asked why it came here, the Yellowknife answers that she monopolized everything and that it did not want to come to this scary place. The headmaster appears behind the fake Kasumi and murders it, making blood flow, and the illusion is broken as the teacher is woken up. The characters themselves realize the monster is using loneliness as a weapon, as Yuri meets back up with Kumi and decides to go save Kasumi. Kumi begins killing the Yellowknife by stabbing its invisible bodies with the Borg's prongs, but as it's dying, it begins begging Kasumi for help. It laments the fact it tried so hard to not let anyone get close and asks why should it die. Before it dies, Kasumi's face comes out of the side of Yellowknife's stomach and asks why, repeating. The creature dies somehow and lets out a modified Kasumi. She is naked and her hair forms in the shape of those frequency oscillators on Yellowknife's back. It blasts Kumi, knocking her Borg off her head, and then begins strangling her, as Yuri watches. Yuri starts crying, unable to move. Her Borg says that if she doesn't do something, she'll kill Kasumi. Kasumi strangles Kumi with incredible force. As the light from her eyes is going out, her Borg says it will kill Kasumi too.
やれユリ、仲間を助けろ。さっさとしないと俺がやっちまうぞ。かすみ殺すぞ。
ダメ、やめて、殺さないで、殺さないで、かすみを殺さないで。誰も嫌よ、嫌よ。殺しちゃ嫌、死んじゃ嫌、死んじゃ嫌、死んじゃ嫌。誰もいなくならないって、いなくなっちゃ
宿主の命が最優先だ。
But Kumi begs him not to do it. No, don't kill Kasumi, don't kill anyone. As Yuri's Borg tries to kill Kasumi and Kumi's Borg tries to stop her, they both clash and Kumi faints, strangled. The Yellowknife on its last breath tells Kasumi that's enough. As it witnesses Yuri's desperate cries, it blows up. Since their fusion meant that it would always be with her, the Yellowknife can die knowing he's become one with Kasumi. We see a scene of both Kumi and Yuri call their moms, and when asked if everything is okay, they say everything's fine. As soon as they hang up, both begin crying hysterically. The juxtaposition exposes the split between social persona and internal collapse. They cannot let them know what happened between them. Normal life begins at school as Kasumi recovers from the hospital. One day, Kumi goes into the library without her Borg. As she goes deeper in, the camera cuts to the Borg running desperately out of the hospital bed, highly injured, towards the library. Kasumi goes into the library only to find Kumi's lifeless body with her innards spilled out in the middle of it. As Yuri gets the news, she begins crying yet again, and the anime ends not with a happy ending but with a tragedy. The characters of Alien 9 are complex and present a broader metaphor of growing up, a fear of loneliness and responsibility, and are tragic in their existences, plagues as they are of unfortunate events and death. Although the series looks cute and childish, it's a terrifying allegory of what it means to grow up and become responsible. To fight with your own needs and wishes. It's hard and honestly heartbreaking story that doesn't even end there, as the manga continues long past where the OVA ends. Suspicion is raised around Kasumi's being, as she isn't quite the same Kasumi as before. She's unfazed to Kumi's death, and Kumi herself had started noticing strange behavior before her death. It's shown that the teacher knows a way to revive Kumi by placing her in a vat filled with cell gel. In the meantime, while looking for clues about the attacker, Yuri and Kasumi are themselves attacked by an alien called a Linax, which is formed out of a bunch of eyes. Both Kasumi and Yuri are overwhelmed by this alien, but their Borgs psychologically manage to transmit that to Kumi's Borg, which speeds up her reconstruction. Together, all three of them defeat it, but both Kasumi and Kumi, are changed. From that point forward, their bodies are less separable from the machinery that sustain them from the creatures. Yuri wakes up from an amnesiac dream. She apparently had wandered on her own into the school's backyard where a bunch of UFOs are fallen and had fainted there after being attacked by some aliens, but in the process she also loses her Borg. Yuri's mom becomes worried for the first time in the series when the girls come pick her up in the morning to begin the research. She even cries herself after Yuri leaves, telling to herself that she should have let Yuri quit the party while she still could, but now she simply can't. To tell the truth, the story about maturity is tragic and not in a good way. The arc in the forest feels by far the most important because after the girls manage to retrieve Yuri's Borg, they both reveal Kumi and Kasumi that they are no longer human, and they are both filled with regret. Kumi no longer is a viable host for symbiosis. She no longer has a stomach or a reproductive system, and Kasumi shares a mind with an extraterrestrial being. Both want to protect Yuri from becoming like them. Aliens in this universe are animalistic, and as such both Kumi and Kasumi's case are not nearly transhumanist. They enhance certain features of the human but also remove from them. In a sense, it's a reversal to the primal. Kumi even states that now she feels lonelier than ever, feeling an intense need to be with someone merely because of her Borg characteristics. In the third and final semester of school, Yuri's Borg begins to become agitated as it desperately wants to fuse with Yuri. Taking pity on it, Mrs. Akawa allows Yuri's Borg to attempt to force Yuri to fuse with it, but Yuri resists and the Borg is stopped by Kumi and Kasumi. At school, a clan of aliens named the Sunflower Clan invades the school and begins possessing people. The whole thing is blown out of proportion and a bunch of infighting happens as Yuri is taken by a sunflower parasite. Eventually, things go back to normal as Yuri is fixed, and as such, the first part of the manga ends. There are two additional parts, but most of the thematic nuance is handled in the first part. The story's entanglement of fear of growing up, fear of your body changing, and responsibility. I felt during the first part that the concept that everyone who has reached adulthood is somehow mixed with an alien to be interesting, but the story never develops that way. I think the second and even the third part, Emulators and Next, all focus on the wrong things. The character drama is still there, but some of the metaphors are weakened, if not removed entirely, by the fact the plot begins focusing on these interplanetary battles and the ones who want to fuse more or less with humans. Regardless, a lot of it is focused on fighting, especially emulators, and never really scratched my itch for what the OVA and the original implanted into me. The emotional and the vulnerable, the sublime and the hidden. Ultimately, I really like the OVA. I feel as though the manga gradually fell out of my graces as I read more, but I feel like the story and its themes of abandonment and transhumanism fit the source material the best and are its greatest strengths. I think it's a nice warning both about instinct, animalistic need for fight or flight, and the need to grow up. My problem is simply that the story of Alien 9 is at its best in the OVA. There, the entirety of the world is built around the grim idea that becoming an adult might entail being no longer human. These aspects are slowly lost throughout the entire runtime of the manga. It's not just that, just like I mentioned above, it's a loss of everything that made Alien 9 good in the first place, from its symbolism to the broader themes of maturity and growth, trickling them down until they're entirely gone. The story ends without closing the wound it opened. The aliens are not entirely gone, and in the reality not much has changed. The friendship and the self are the only things that remain. In an ethereal glow, we wonder yet again what we truly know. Unfortunately, that may be nothing. We're weak. I'm weak. I can't do it. I can't do it. I cannot. Is what I often tell myself. Just like Yuri, I wish to escape from all around me, but without much choice I have to mutate, to move forward to tomorrow and grab what's in front and choose both fight and flight. To learn to depend on others and become close is what Alien 9 teaches us. Maybe someday the dusk will be clear again to show all the friendships I've made forever. But not today. The contemplation ends here. I leave you to your thoughts. May your day be